Hello everybody. So this is my turn to do this time. So Ryan's tapped out and tapped me in so I can do the webinar this week. So what I'm going to do is run through a few things. I thought what we try and do different this time is to set up an agenda. And what that means I'm going to be doing is I'll put a timestamp at the bottom, so when you get to the end of this video, when we upload it onto YouTube, I'll put some timestamps in there. So we got some really good feedback from Ryan, so thanks for all of that. So when you guys fed back to what Ryan was talking about, we're going to basically split this into probably 3 or 4 sections, answering your questions along the way as we go through this. So the agenda for today, so we've obviously kicked off with Alexa. That's new for us at Genius Hub. We kind of launched it around about February time. It's really neat what you can do with Alexa. So I think it's kind of very much voice activation is going to be the future. So I'll come on to all of that in a bit. Then what we're going to talk about is IFTTT. That we get a lot of questions on our forum about IFTTT. There's some things that you can do in IFTTT which you can't do in Alexa. So kind of keeping the theme on interconnectivity, I'll then touch upon IFTTT. Then what we're going to do is, just to sow a seed out there for you, is to talk about things like whole house and groups. So that's something that is, the way that Genius Hub works is it's really, really flexible when you get to bigger properties and kind of creating different groups for different things. Certainly the smart thermostats out there on the market, as I understand it, none of them offer anything like that type of flexibility of how you can split your building up if you've got quite complicated ones. It also causes a few questions about how it works, so I'm going to be running through that as well. So I've got another thing if we have time at the end, also asking some of your questions, recapping on some of the things that Ryan talked about as well with regards radiators heating rooms properly, kind of some troubleshooting tips for that. What I'll do is I'll split this into two halves. So about halfway through, about 1:30, I'll go through and answer some of your questions. So do post all your questions on YouTube. Look forward to seeing those, and then I'll be able to answer those as we go through. So just whilst I set up my screen this time, I'm just going to put you on hold, and then I'll just check everything's working from my colleagues in the office. Right, back there. Sorry about that. Okay, so yes, thanks. Just checked everything was working fine. So yeah, you should be able to see my screen there, and I'll crack straight on. Just to give you a quick heads up, obviously with the coronavirus situation that we've got here, the rule here at Genius Hub is that only one person is allowed into the office at any one time. So today is me, because I'm obviously doing this. However, we haven't had our pickup from DPD yet. Yes, we are still shipping kits. So yeah, so that's if I hear the doorbell ring during this, then I'm afraid I will have to duck out. They come any time basically, and I assumed that they were going to come in just after I started this video. So Right, so if I do have to duck out, I'll put the whole screen back again. So let's just start with essentially the feature focus for today in this webinar, which is Amazon Alexa. So if I just to kind of give you some feedback, an update on where we stand with Alexa. So initially, about 3 years ago probably, we launched with IFTTT. In essence, IFTTT is probably a lot more powerful. What you can do with IFTTT, it stands for if this then that. You can link your Genius Hub to so many different things, and likewise link other things to Genius Hub. It's really, really good, and I'm going to go on to that later. What is probably better about the Amazon Alexa is just how easy it is to use. So very, very straightforward to set up. Basically, it doesn't really need any setting up apart from actually just kind of connecting the two accounts. And obviously, I think when it comes down to the voice, then yeah, the voice is going to be the big thing, I think, over the next 5 years. Further than that, we'll probably have other ways of communicating. But essentially, you know, just using our fingers to communicate with stuff is quite slow. I think Amazon Alexa and Siri and all of the other smart voice recognition systems really are at the forefront of breaking new ground. And I think that just makes our lives so much easier because we can just talk to our Alexa and get the most out of it and get the most out of anything else that we have that is smart through our voice, rather than having to have lots of apps. That's often a question that we get asked about the apps is, well, you know, isn't it better if actually you've all got it in one app? And I think that the voice command systems are going to bring all those together, so that basically you don't really think about the Genius app apart from setting up the heating schedule to start with and maybe doing some kind of more technical kind of diagnostic of things. But actually day-to-day running of the system, you just use your voice. So what I've got on the screen up here then is essentially how to set it up. So I'm going to spend probably just 5 minutes spinning through this. I know this works because I did it this morning. I had to bring my own Alexa into the office for this webinar and to run through that together. So this was basically what you need to do. So you use your regular Amazon account. I think that's what most people do because obviously it's the Amazon Alexa. So use your regular Amazon account to register your Alexa. I'm assuming all that's been done at this point. So essentially you then download the Amazon Alexa app onto your smartphone or smart device. You can do all of this on a computer as well, so you don't have to link it on a smartphone. And then you basically end up with your Amazon Alexa. I've got the Eco Dot here. You can see I muted it because every time I say her name, obviously she starts chatting to us. So yeah, so you've got that. So essentially you link it to the app on your smart device, and then essentially you kind of then pretty much most of it is then actually done for you. Then it's just a case of learning some of the simple routines, and we'll go through those simple ones that you can use today as part of this. And obviously I'll answer any questions that I get asked on more complicated things. So Alexa for us is it's under a skill essentially. So you go to the app on your smart device and you click on the bit where it says essentially main menu in the top left and then skills and games. Then you click on the search icon there, which is in the top right hand corner, and then once you type in Genius Hub, essentially you then end up searching for a Genius Hub skill, which then, as you see I scroll down this page, takes you straight to the Genius Hub Smart Home skill. Then you tap on that, and then essentially that gets it ready to use. You then choose Enable to Use. Tap on that. And what this is basically doing is telling Alexa that you want to use this skill, which is something we've set up for you. Now you need to link it to your Genius Hub. So this is obviously specific to you. So what you need to do is you need to type in the username and the password for your Genius Hub. So this is not the account that you might have set up when you bought your Genius Hub. This is the one for your Genius Hub. So when you launch the Genius Hub app on your smartphone and you're controlling your heating, you obviously, if the first time you do this or when you registered the system, you gave it a username and a password, and that's what you're about to do here, is type in that same username and password. Once you click on login, it asks you to allow, and that's basically allowing the two systems to talk together. And then essentially, once you've moved on from that, it will then say successfully linked, essentially. So that's linked the two together, but now what you need to really do is think about discovering the devices. So depending on how you set this up, the way that it really works with devices is it's really thinking about the zones that you have set up. So it's not going to list every single radiator, every single smart plug, or every single room sensor you have in your home. What it's going to do is it's going to discover the rooms that you have set up on your app. So if you create new rooms, they will then appear in Alexa. Discover devices, that's what you then click on. Then takes you to Amazon's looking for all of the devices, but by that we really mean rooms or zones on your Genius Hub. It will find all those, and then essentially you can then see them by clicking on the devices in the bottom right hand corner. So once you click on those devices, that will give you everything on your Genius Hub, and then as you can see along the top there, you've got your switches, your thermostats, and everything. So anything that it understands as being an on-off type of zone, so this might be used for hot water, or it might be used for smart plugs, they go into switches. Anything that you use for temperature control, this could be a room with radiators in it, a room with underfloor heating, it could be a room for electric heating that we do. Or it might also be your hot water as well. So if you've chosen to have your time and temperature add-on, which is a product that we sell where you can see the temperature of your hot water tank, that goes into thermostats because it's no longer an on-off zone. It's now basically one that you can control the temperature of. So that's all in there. So then I'll show you the app. Well, no, actually, no. What we're first going to do is run through some routines. So. Okay, so some routines. I'm going to unpause the speaker on this Amazon Echo Dot here. We've got yeah. So now every time I say the name, she'll make a noise. So let's start off with Alexa. Set the kitchen to 23 degrees for 3 hours.
Holding the temperature of 23 for 3 hours.
There we go. So that's what I've said there. Now obviously I'm going to get some feedback. Let's look at the app of what's going on here. So the system that I've got this linked to, you'll see essentially that might have just updated your side, and essentially the kitchen has now boosted essentially, and that's what Alexa's doing here, is essentially she's boosting rooms, and I can boost them up and I can boost them down, and I can also set the duration. So if I click on kitchen here, I'll see that it's been boosted to 23 degrees. And then I can also see that it's been boosted for 3 hours, which has got 2 hours and 59 minutes remaining. So that's quite neat that you can basically just select as long as you want, essentially. So if I just choose the next command. So Alexa, what is the temperature in the living room, please?
The living room temperature is 21.5 degrees.
So the please is obviously optional. I'm trying to get into good habits here of when technology is looking after us, that they'll be nice to us, hopefully. So using the word please, hopefully they'll remember that. So yeah, that's essentially requesting the temperature of any room. So it doesn't matter what room the Alexa is in itself. Obviously, we can just ask the temperature of any single room in your house. So if you're not sure about that, then that's quite useful. So one of the things just to point out here is that, and I'll come back to this obviously when I'm answering some of your feedback on this, is that Alexa, I think, is probably at the forefront of the smart home kit, really. I think it's got the most interconnectivity, which is why one of the reasons why we all at Genius Hub chose to integrate that one first. We are the thing is, Alexa's not really that well set up for doing many zones, which is obviously the Genius Hub is all about zoning your home. So we generally find that if you're comparing it to the likes of the Hive or the Nest, which are traditionally more of a smart thermostat rather than a zone system, then essentially you end up with a situation that there are things that will possibly fall down with Alexa and lots of zoning. But if you're patient and you have another go, then understanding what you're saying, it will work. So one of the other neat things that you can do, and there's a link on our website I'll come to in a minute, which kind of shows you what you can say to Alexa. Then essentially you can change the mode of a room, for example. So if I don't want the kitchen to be boosting anymore, I can tell Alexa just to put it back to what it was. So Alexa, set living room to auto.
It's set to auto.
Okay, I'm being a bit daft there because actually living room was already set to that, so set to auto. So let's try another one. Alexa, set the kitchen to auto.
I don't know how to set kitchen to that setting.
There we go. So this is the Alexa doing a live demonstration and not doing what we should do. It worked when I practiced this just before I started. Normally, if you click on, say, set back to auto, essentially auto is our timer mode, essentially, which is the system would just go straight back to that. Likewise, you can just say off as well, and then she'll just turn the room off. So if we try something different, so Alexa, turn on the bedside lamp.
Okay.
There you go. There was a small click to my right as a smart plug turned on. Yeah, so on-off zones, and this comes back to some of the feedback. So essentially, an on-off zone, which is what smart plugs are, is the same as if you have hot water. Then essentially they are what's called power controller. Now, currently in Alexa, you can't set a power controller to anything more than 60 minutes. So we're changing that in Alexa our end. We'll update you when we've made that change so that it will default to essentially the manual override time that you set in the app. So then it will stay on for longer if you want it to. Currently it just sets on for the default 60 minutes. So again, this is us in some respects. Alexa changes the way that they set things up, changes that about every kind of like couple of months it seems. So we have to kind of keep up with that and implement more things. So we'll let you know when you can do more with the on-off. And it looks like at the moment, at least with Alexa, we're limited that we can't actually choose an utterance to say to do it for say 3 hours or 10 hours. That's not a choice for us at the moment, but we will at least make it so you can set it to the manual duration. Okay. So anything else to talk about with Alexa? So if I go back to here, I had using smart plugs. We'll come on to that in a second. So if I just look and see whether or not I've got any questions about the Alexa. Okay, so the first question I've got here is from Ross, and it's about essentially when Alexa doesn't report back that she's done what she's supposed to have done. Yeah, I've spoken to our hub team about this. So the reason for this is essentially that there's most likely a timeout issue with Alexa, which basically means that essentially when your Genius Hub essentially has done it, it's done it, but it hasn't communicated back to Alexa quickly enough that essentially that it has done it, which means Alexa still thinks that it might not have done it yet. If you were to ask again after another 30 seconds, you'll probably find that it has updated correctly. But that timeout thing is obviously something that we'll look to improve our side, so it should be there straight away. Certainly that seems to be the main thing. I have seen it as well occasionally. It really depends on my internet connection. So if I'm Sometimes, because I'm seeing this in on site or in different places, if they don't have a particularly quick internet connection, then it can have a problem with that. Generally speaking, in my flat where I live in the city centre of Birmingham, don't have any problems at all. It always comes back instantly with it's done what I want it to do. So we believe that to be a timeout thing, and as I said, we'll look to improve that if we can. If it's something that we can do our side, obviously that's something that we'll look into. So I said that we'd talk about Alexa to start with, and then we'd move into IFTTT. So I'm just going to quickly check there's no more questions on Alexa to start with. So just put you on hold for that, and then I'll come back and talk about IFTTT. So yeah, me back again. Actually, I'll swap onto this window. It's probably better if you can see some of these comments. So Anthony, yeah, thanks for your feedback on that. Yes. So the answer to your question there is not working specifically for you. So I'm a reasonably early adopter of the Genius system and have a complicated mix of underfloor heating and radiators. I recently bought a room sensor and a switch to control a new electric heater in a bathroom. The sensor will not allow me to thermostatically control the heater. What's going on here, Anthony, is essentially it's to do with the way that you set up that zone. So when you create the zone in the first place, you get a number of options. You can create it as an on-off type of zone, or a radiator zone, or an underfloor heating zone. So if you are controlling an electric heater, I know this isn't particularly clear, but what you need to do is choose the wet underfloor setting. It will basically mean that it will control the output, and in that case it might be a smart plug or an electric switch, and it will turn it on and off basically depending on how close to the target temperature that it measures. If you set it as an on-off zone, I know that might make some sense, but basically that is just on and off. And in an on-off zone, it will ignore the temperature, essentially. So the on-off zones are there for devices like smart plugs, where you're just plugging in a lamp or something like that. Whereas if you want to control a something to do with heating source, then essentially you need to choose either wet underfloor or radiator. There's a neat difference there, which is that this is actually something that we noticed on people's systems. So sometimes you'll see that people put smart plugs into rooms on their app. So if you've got a radiator room called living room, and then on the app you put your smart plug in there, then what you'll find actually is every time that room goes orange on the app, essentially that smart plug will click on, essentially, and that's because that zone is calling for heat. And we designed the system that way, so if you were to get a secondary portable heater, you could then plug that into your smart plug, if you saw what I mean. And then if the radiator wasn't quite powerful enough to heat the room, you could have a secondary smart plug to boost that, essentially. Obviously, if you put a smart plug into an underfloor heating type of room, Here we use our TPI algorithm, so it's a lot more complicated and a lot more accurate, rather than just being a blanket on and off, depending on if the room is above the temperature or below the temperature. With TPI control, which is what we do for wet underfloor heating, is essentially the closer it gets to the target temperature. Now we generally set that to within 2 degrees. The closer it gets, it will start to throttle back how much it's on. So essentially, when it reaches the target temperature, essentially it will be off. Essentially, so yeah, if you set up that one, then Anthony, hopefully that will answer that question. Yeah, nice to see if you yeah, there's a funny story in America about I think a news article where some little child ordered something on her Alexa, like a doll's house, and then in everyone's house across America who had the news article saying about this, who had Alexa, they also got a doll's house. So yeah, at least we're here, we're just talking about boosting heating. The Alexa connection. So from Lance on this question here, the Alexa connection looks just like what I want for Google Home. Will you be doing something similar to Google Home? Yeah, thanks for that question. Essentially, it just comes down to popularity, really. So, for example, it's the same with Apple Siri as well. Essentially, it just needs to be the ones that seem to pick up the most connectivity and the most interoperability with other systems are the ones that we'll choose to adopt. Apple didn't do us any favors, or didn't do some of our competitors any favors, when they initially stated that you had to essentially install a bit of hardware within your hardware for actually get Apple HomeKit to work. They've now relaxed on that because they've realized that actually the uptake, that was really stifling the uptake of smart systems working with Apple HomeKit. But yeah, they said it was a security thing. Well, I can understand that, but at the same time, the other people didn't seem to need that. So yeah, so answering that question for Lance, and also for Michael there, essentially we will be looking to integrate with other things. I think you need to remember that the Genius Hub, we don't want to be the kind of the smart home in some sense. We want to be the very best at heating, essentially. So what you'll notice is a divergence of some of the other systems on the market to try and do other things, like security, like blinds, and essentially they're, with the greatest respect in the world, I think you'll probably find they're not as good at doing heating when they take the focus off heating. We are 100% about giving you the smartest heating system on the market, and also about saving you the most energy on the market. And that's why Genius Hub started with a system that was zoned, and we also started with a system that was smart and would learn when you use those zones, because that is absolutely what everyone at Genius Hub strives to do, is to save energy and to have a really smart system. That's kind of what the mantra behind the company is. So we want to be smart and we want to save energy. Controlling blinds has got some really smart things in it, but it's if we focus on those sorts of things, we'll probably take some of our focus off heating, and we want to maintain our position at the best of heating. So that's the questions for now. So let's jump straight into for example, using IFTTT. So I've opened up a couple of pages here for you. So this is on our forum, which is an absolute brilliant place for you to be able to get in touch with us. And I'm quite active on here, so Simon. April's brilliant. So April looks after our support, and you'll often see her kind of commenting to what people say on here as well. So we've got some active users on here as well, which we often see. So it's really great to kind of to see them often contributing to what people are saying. So IFTTT, this is a more powerful version of basically Alexa in my mind. It essentially allows you to link it with lots of different things, as Alexa can as well, but it also allows you to take more out of the Genius Hub. So to give you an example of some of the things that you can do with IFTTT, and these are questions that we've been asked. You can link, for example, IFTTT to give you your battery levels. So if you wanted to get a notification that you had a low battery, rather than just finding out that the radiator valve had a low battery and you didn't kind of the radiator didn't behave as you expected, then essentially you can set up a notification, and that either triggers straight to your phone, or it can trigger you to an email or a text message. So battery levels is quite a good notification you can set up if that's something that you don't want to routinely change them. A lot of our customers will routinely change the batteries every summer, and then battery level isn't an issue, or every couple of summers, just change them all in one go, and then you don't need to think about them. But if you're changing them as you go, then that might be helpful. Geolocation is another really good one with IFTTT. Easy to set up. Is to show you what it basically looks like on the screen here. So if you've got IFTTT, you just go to IFTTT.com. You can see that on the website up at the top there, and then just search for Genius Hub essentially. Once you've searched for it, I won't go through the details here because that would probably be patronizing most of you guys. Kind of know how to set up IFTTT. If you haven't already, it's very similar to what you do with Amazon Alexa. You just simply hit connect and essentially connect it to your Genius Hub. Then what you can do is you can take some of the routines which have already been set up. These are popular routines that people have set up, or you can create your own. Okay, and I know that I've definitely seen that in support, that people think that you can't create your own. You absolutely can do anything you like with IFTTT. So if you want to create your own routine, that is really easy. To give you an idea of one of the ones that I saw recently on our forum was about how to automatically use IFTTT to automatically bring on your lights at sunset. So if you've got your smart plug, obviously they boost the wireless signal around that property for your Z-Wave, which is the system that the Genius Hub uses. But obviously we chose to use a smart plug because then you can plug something in and you can control that as well. So if you wanted to plug a lamp in, then obviously you could get that lamp to automatically turn on at sunset. And then I just have a routine on my Genius Hub, and it's again done through IFTTT, where it automatically then just boosts it off for 1 minute at about midnight, 11 o'clock or midnight, I think. And what that basically means is that it doesn't keep the light on all night. Just at midnight, it just then turns it off again, if you see what I mean. So useful if you've got smart plugs set up, if you've got children, young children that might be kind of moving around the house at night so they don't trip over anything. Then obviously you can set them to turn on at sunset, even though sunset obviously changes every single day. To get more information about how to set up IFTTT, we've got loads of help information on this on our website. Essentially, if you go to our website and then type in IFTTT, if I show you how you can do that there. So if you go to the Genius Hub website, essentially, and then you choose support at the top up here, and then you choose user technical portal, sorry. Then that will take you to our page where there's a lot of support about how to set up things like IFTTT, and also Alexa's on there as well. So if I just let that load, a bit slower to load when I'm obviously streaming as well. But in a few seconds that'll load on, and then if I type in IFTTT, there's a box down the bottom. You can type in what you want with regards to search, and then basically it will tell me what I want. And it will give me some articles. So, well, in a few seconds it's going to load. If I can't be bothered to wait for it to load, I'll just go back to this. So this will come back. There you go. So if I was to type in IFTTT, it would take us straight to this page, essentially. And this gives you some ideas of what you can do and things like that. So just to give you a few seeds of different things that you can do with IFTTT. So a really good one that we use actually in commercial settings, as well as potentially you could use this in your own homes as well, is linking it to Google Calendar. So if you use Google Calendar to kind of manage events in your own personal diary, you can also get it to manage the heating as well. So a good example for that is you've got a spare room, and you obviously keep that off most of the time. But for example, if you kind of have a diary where you kind of maybe put notes in your diary as to when you've got guests staying or when you've got friends coming to stay, actually if you create a trigger word in there, and it could just be heat, for example, if you just type in that, or staying or visiting, you can choose any keyword you like. If you write that keyword into the the event that you create in Google Calendar, essentially, then Google will pick that up and it will then automatically boost your heating for the duration that they stay. So if you set that they're going to be staying for the weekend, then it will automatically keep the heating on in their room for let's say 21 degrees, whatever you set, essentially. So a really neat little routine, which means that occasionally if you forget to turn the spare room on, obviously you can go straight to the Genius Hub app if you want to. But this webinar is all about linking different things, essentially. So yeah, that's one of the neat things you can do with IFTTT. So I'm going to put you on pause again to see if there's any other questions, and then I'm going to talk and do a deep dive into some things like whole house. So this is a question that we get asked all the time about how to kind of set up whole house properly. We've released a few new things. So I'll be right back in a minute with some answers, and then we're going to do a deep dive into whole house. Right, back again. Okay, so yeah, thank you. So we've got a question in from Ken Holt, which is essentially about do we control air conditioning? The short answer is no. The longer answer is yes, we actually do in commercial buildings, if you sort of mean. So if I just say no to start with, then the reason I'm saying no is because essentially we don't have something that means that you can set up on the app, for example, a temperature, and then set the temperature to say, kind of like 18 degrees, and then it would have an IR sensor, an IR transmitter, infrared transmitter, which would then necessarily communicate with your air conditioning unit. I mean, I think if you look at the way that the industry is going in this direction, I think that smart air conditioning systems are only just around the corner, and there are already ones on the market, I'm absolutely certain. Really, so it's a case of rather than us controlling a dumb or one that only has local control, let's say, then essentially really it would just be a case of linking your air conditioning system, if you've got a smart one potentially, to Alexa or to IFTTT or to Google Home or anything like that, and then essentially you can just get them all to talk together. The other answer, which is where we can control them, is something. If you check out your own air conditioning system for this, one of the major problems in commercial properties, and I head up the commercial team here at Genius Hub, so I see this often and far too often. You'll see radiators in a room, and then you'll also see an air conditioning unit on the wall. They use the air conditioning unit during the summer, supposedly, and then they use the radiators during the winter, supposedly. So what actually happens is everyone just uses everything all the time, essentially. So it'll be the middle of the summer, the radiators will be on flat out, air conditioning's trying as hard as it can to cool down that room. Bearing in mind, I think the statistic is it uses 8 times more energy to cool by 1 degree than it does to heat by 1 degree. So heating is quite efficient. Air conditioning, it's really hard to cool rooms down. So don't quote me on that 8 times, but I think it's a lot harder to cool a room than it is to heat a room. Then the next thing you get during the winter is somebody will be cold. So they'll turn the radiator up next to them, likewise somebody on the other side of the room is too hot, so the air conditioning gets turned on next to them. So we solve that problem. So we do control air conditioning in that sense. Most air conditioning units have the ability to take a remote connection, and it's normally what's known as a volt-free contact, essentially, and that essentially disables the air conditioning. So you can easily set up, and we do this all the time on commercial properties now, set up an electric switch, for example, and that electric switch would then be wired to what's called a changeover relay, and then you use that changeover relay to basically provide you that volt-free contact onto your air conditioning unit. And what that basically means is that when you're heating the room, the electric switch turns on, and therefore it disables the air conditioning. So you can't have that situation where the air conditioning is running at the same time as the radiators. That's one good example of how we do it. An alternative is if you only have air conditioning in the room, then essentially what we do in some offices where they just have air conditioning is we use our room sensors, and essentially we kind of run it in the opposite way. So if there's somebody in the room, then we enable the air conditioning. So the air conditioning can run to its heart's content, either heating or cooling. However, if the room is left unoccupied and this room sensor says, right, this room is no longer being used, then it disables the air conditioning, essentially. So even if it got left on by the users, it won't be running all night. It will then shut down, essentially. So yeah, so that hopefully answers your questions, Ken, about air conditioning. As I said, the short answer is no. The longer answer is yes, if you do the other things, as I just said. Right, okay, so let's do a deep dive now into the app. So what I'm going to cover now is just change the screen so you can see my window. Okay, here we go. So essentially, the way Whole House works, this is an interesting one because it does cause some questions for people. So the way that we set this up initially, so bear in mind that we launched this product around about 10 years ago into kind of beta testing, and then about 8 years ago it went into kind of customer release. Now, what that means is we created a system that we could try and make as simple as possible for people. So any rooms that you create, and these are only radiator rooms, so any radiator rooms that you create on your app, when they turn on, essentially they will turn on what's called Whole House. And Whole House is what you've got here under this My House thing here on the right hand side. So in My House or Whole House, whichever one, essentially we put either the single channel receiver that controls your boiler, or we put one of the channels of your dual channel receiver. And what that basically means is that you can essentially control, and essentially whenever you add any more rooms to your house, you don't really need to think about it. It's not particularly difficult. You add another radiator room, and if it's got radiators, the app understands that this is a radiator type of room, therefore it automatically needs to add that to the kind of part of the software that means that it will then bring the boiler on. So under My House setup here, you can see essentially if I scroll down, and essentially I've got my dual channel receiver, which actually I have got that here next to me, so you can probably just about put it a bit closer. You can see I've got my dual channel receiver there. That's what the dual channel receiver looks like. It has two channels, channel 1 and channel 2, and I've assigned channel 1, which is the top button, essentially because there's two buttons, two little white buttons, to the heating, which is what you'd normally have. Okay. This system here, as you can see on my screen, also has a hot water control as well. So if I click on hot water, and then I just choose the setup again, so the 3 dots, and then I choose zone setup. Essentially, this is taking device number 13, which is the device, everything has an ID, so this is number 13, and it's channel number 2, essentially, which is why it says /2 there. So the way that the app knows the difference between essentially whether when you turn on hot water what it should do, and when you turn on living room what it should do, is simply the fact that hot water is an on-off zone, and because it's an on-off zone, essentially that means that Whole House ignores it, or My House ignores it. Okay, likewise I've also got another on-off zone here, which is my bedside lamp. That again is just being completely ignored by Whole House. So I can turn either of those on and off and it won't affect Whole House. Okay, the living room, the kitchen and the bedroom and also the bathroom here are essentially all radiator rooms, so they've got radiator valves in them, and as a result, if they call on, then they will turn on whole house. So to go to a bit of a, take this to the next level is a case of, and this is really where the Genius Hub, if you've got, so if you had your system installed, Genius Hub system installed, say 5 to 7 years ago, what you might find that is that this is kind of how it's set up. But actually we have got new things that run and help you if you've got a more complicated property which maybe has an upstairs or a downstairs heating zone. You might, for example, have like an annex as part of yours which has a different boiler in. You can still control that all within one Genius Hub essentially. So you don't need multiple Genius Hubs, you just need what's called groups. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is just quickly show you how to change this demo system that I've got here to, rather than having one boiler, I'm going to split it so I basically have upstairs and downstairs essentially. So just check my notes to check I haven't missed anything. Okay, so right, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my dual channel receiver essentially out of my house. Okay, so if I just click on the dustbin there, that takes it out. Okay, so easy to put back. If I want to put it back, I just click on assign device essentially, and there's my channel 1, which is the top button of my dual channel receiver. If I want to put it back in, I just click on that and then put it back in, but I don't. So now basically what will happen is if any of these rooms call for heat, nothing is going to happen, because essentially normally these 4 rooms would call on whole house. Okay, so what I'm going to do instead is create a group. So I click on the 3 dots up here and I choose create new zone. Choose next, create new zone. This is the doctor helping me through what I'm trying to do, and I'm going to call it upstairs. And these, as I was referring earlier to, on-off, radiator and wet underfloor. There you go. Those are our 3 types of rooms that we mainly use. So on-off is your smart plug. If you want to create a group, create a zone that just controls your smart plug, that's what you do. If you want to control radiators, you use a radiator. If you want to control wet underfloor, then that puts in our TPI algorithm that I discussed earlier. There's wet underfloor and hot water temperature. As you can see, the 2 options there, they're actually very similar in the background. They both use the TPI algorithm, but obviously you can set different temperatures for those. I'm going to create a group. I'm going to create a group and then choose create room. That's now creating a group for me. All done. Okay, so I've now got a group. So you'll see this dot appear. And what this basically means is it's a bit like whole house, but now I've got multiple ones. Okay, I'm now going to create another group just so I can then, so you can see 2 dots there. So I click on create new zone, click on next, then choose create new zone, choose next. This one I'm going to call downstairs. Okay, and I'm going to create another group. Done. So now I've got my my 2 groups there. Now, if I hover over the screen, because I'm using a screen, obviously like a computer, if on an app you can't see this, but essentially I've got upstairs there and I've got downstairs there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my bedroom, because my bedroom and my bathroom essentially are upstairs. So the way I do this is I click on my groups to start with, and I'm going to choose my upstairs. Okay, and it's saying this group is not linked to any zones. And now what I'm going to do is put some zones into this group so that essentially they just control upstairs. So I click on the 3 dots, I choose group setup, and then I choose link to zone. Okay, so I click on link to zone down here and I can now choose which rooms I want to add. So I'm going to choose my bedroom because that's upstairs. My bathroom I don't need to worry about because my bathroom is actually already part of my bedroom as far as the Genius app is concerned. So by default, the bathroom will be okay because it's kind of already connected to the bedroom. Okay, click on link there. So there you go. That's now connected my bedroom to my upstairs. So if my bedroom turns on, then so will my upstairs group. If I do the same now and you can see it's gone orange because my bedroom's actually currently calling on If I turn my bedroom off, you'll see, so I've just turned my bedroom off now, you'll see there for in a few seconds that will turn blue because there's nothing upstairs calling for heat. Again, so if I want to now sort out downstairs, so I click on my downstairs here, click on downstairs, click on the three dots, choose group setup. This time I'm going to add 2 rooms to it, so click on link to zone. You've got essentially my living room and you've got the kitchen there as well. So those are the 2 groups, two rooms that I want essentially to be able to turn on downstairs essentially. So click on link there. Okay, so now if I go back, I will see that essentially I've now got my 2 groups, and essentially within my downstairs groups you can see I've got 2 rooms. Now that's kind of it. There's one bit I've missed as a key bit, which I'll come on to in a second, but essentially that has now split my house into upstairs and downstairs. The last bit is obviously the app doesn't yet know what to control. So yeah, the app is doing all its bit quite happily, in the sense that the living room and the kitchen, when they turn on, they're going to make that group downstairs is going to become active and go orange. The flip side is that that's not actually anything is going to happen just yet, because the second step is I now need to tell the app what to control. And the way to think about the app is its inputs and outputs. Inputs is it's got inputs from temperature, it's got inputs from you as the user, boosting rooms and things like that. And the outputs are it controlling stuff, such as controlling a smart plug, controlling a dual channel receiver, controlling a radiator valve, for example. So what I need to do is I now need to sort out what it's going to control. So I click on my downstairs here. And then I click on the 3 dots again. So this is the page. I could have done this all in one go, but I was just kind of splitting it up to hopefully make it clearer. And now I'm going to assign a device. So I've only got one device I can assign, which is the top button of my dual channel receiver, essentially. Now, if this was your home and you bought the right kit, obviously here I'm just kind of playing around a bit really, but essentially you might have a dual channel receiver here with both of these channels free. Currently my dual channel receiver, the bottom button is assigned to my hot water. But what you could, for example, is assign the dual channel receiver top button to downstairs, and then that's wired to the zone valve that does your downstairs. You might then have a single channel receiver, which is another product we sell, which just controls one zone essentially, and then you would then link the upstairs to that one. So to give you an idea of that, I'll just take it back. Hopefully this will be clear enough. So I'm going to pretend that actually my hot water is no longer on my dual channel receiver. So I'm going to go to the main zone setup there, and I'm going to disconnect essentially my dual channel receiver now, because actually probably more likely if I had this set up, I'd put my hot water on a single channel receiver, because that can sit there neatly, and if I want to boost my hot water I can just push the on button on that. But likewise my upstairs, downstairs, I want that on my dual channel receiver because I can clearly label them. So if I go back to my groups, essentially I'm going to click on upstairs, I click on the 3 dots, I choose group setup. Hopefully I've gone through this a couple of times now, so you're more familiar with these screens. I click on assign device. I've now got 2 free, and I'm going to do the top button, essentially click on assign. Okay, I just heard it click in the background, so obviously it must have been on before. And now I'm going to go to the other group, so click on downstairs, click on the 3 dots, choose group setup. This one too is assign device, and I'm going to choose the bottom button. Makes sense, bottom button would be your downstairs, choose assign. Okay, so there we go, you've got upstairs and downstairs there set up, and the way that I can check that I've got that set up correctly is I can go to our devices page. So I click on the 3 lines there, I choose settings, and then I choose devices. This shows me everything that I've got set up. My dual channel receiver is down here, number 13, and if I expand on it, I can see that relay switch number 1, which is the top stairs, is upstairs, relay switch number 2 is downstairs. Okay, so we've taken this from a system where initially I had relay switch number 1 was assigned to my whole house, which meant any radiator would have brought it on. Now only the upstairs radiators will bring that on. Okay. Secondly, with radiators, relay switch number 2, now just my downstairs rooms are going to do that, essentially. So that will bring on relay switch number 2. Hot water, I just need to bear in mind that actually I'm not controlling my hot water through this app anymore, because what I'd have to do is now add a single channel receiver and then assign that to my hot water so it could control that. and obviously make sure I've done all the wiring correct as well, obviously. So hopefully that's a bit of a demo as a deep dive into whole house and groups. And if I just quickly pick up on a couple of things that you need to know about with whole house. That would be the sense that if you create a zone which is underfloor heating or on-off or temperature hot water, those don't control whole house. And that's just an important thing to remember. So what you'll sometimes see if we ship a system to you is we'll use these groups. For example, if you've got lots of zones of underfloor heating, or it's to do with the wiring of the way that your underfloor heating is wired, essentially. So we can group lots of rooms together. We can control boilers, or we can not control boilers. It is extremely flexible the way that we've set this up with the groups, essentially, as to how we can control what you want. In a similar vein, just to touch on one new thing before we run out of time at the end, it's to do, and it's kind of using a similar concept really to the groups here. It's understanding that the devices can do more than one thing. So what I'm now going to talk about is the house thermostat. So I've got a house thermostat here. Essentially, this is one of our demo ones, essentially, that I've got here, but this is what I'm talking about when I say the house thermostat. Essentially, this is providing that temperature there of 21.2 that you can see on the app, 21.2 on the right-hand side. What you can do is you can get the system to, for example, and the reason why I set up the groups first is that so actually I can get that house thermostat to not control everything all in one go, but actually just control downstairs. So currently, if I press the boost button and change the temperature on that thermostat, it will affect all of the radiator rooms in the property. What I want to change that through, though, is to change it so actually it just does, say, for example, downstairs. So to do that, I click on the group My House Setup. I've got my house thermostat there. I don't want it to be in whole house anymore. I'm going to take it out. And then I've now got a spare house thermostat, so I've lost the temperature there. It's no longer reporting that into my whole house. But instead, I'm going to apply it to living room and kitchen. Now, actually, my house thermostat, I'm going to say, is in the hallway. So I don't really want the temperature here to appear from the thermostat, because that's not actually the temperature in the living room. The temperature in the living room, I'm happy. It's for example, this radiator here, this valve, and I don't want that to be coming from a hallway. So I'm happy with the fact that it's using the temperature from the radiator valve here. But I want to be able to press a button in the hallway and it boosts both of those rooms downstairs. So what I can do is I can take part of a device and I can assign part of a device or a channel and assign that channel to a room. So if I click on living room there, click on the three dots, choose zone setup. In my living room, I can choose assign device. If you just scroll down, you can see I've got my radiator valve and I've got a room sensor in my living room. I choose assign device and I can choose show details here. So I don't put the whole thermostat in, I just want part of it. So I choose show details and I want to choose the set temperature only. Now what this is going to do is mean that every time I adjust the temperature on my thermostat, it will affect just that room. And I'll appear now on my channels. I've now got the set temperature from device number 3 has appeared. So I've got a set temperature coming from number 4, which is me changing the temperature on the valve. I can also apply that change. If I apply a change to the room thermostat, sorry, it will apply to this zone as well. Let's do it quickly for the other room. So click on kitchen. It's the 3 dots. I choose zone setup. I'm going to go down there so you can see it appear. So I've got a room sensor in my kitchen. There should be a valve, but typically this is a demo system, so nothing is ever as you'd expect. There should normally be a valve in here. I click on assign device. I choose show details. I choose set temperature again and choose assign. Okay, that will now appear as set temperature. Okay, if I go back now to my home page and I'm going to have my bedroom in normal timer. There we go. Well, it's in sense mode, but similar kind of concept. Right, so now what happens if I take my thermostat and I press the top button here? It's going to be increasing the temperature. Difficult to see when it's got a screen on it. Just doing it when it's got a sticker on it, sorry. There you go. So I'm going to boost this right up to 24.5 degrees I've just set on this thermostat. Now, all being well, what should happen now is that boost should then apply to my living room and my kitchen. I've just heard a click come on. I can see that my downstairs groups came on, okay, and I can see on the right hand side my living room and my kitchen came on. So there you go, pretty simple. Hopefully I've taken, to recap, my house thermostat out of my whole house. It's physically, let's say, still located in my hallway, but I've taken it out of whole house. And instead I've now just put the set temperature into the rooms that I want it to control, if you see what I mean. So yeah, hopefully that's straightforward. So it looks like I'm almost up for time, but I'll quickly just check if there's any questions for you. So if you just hang there a second, I'll see if there's any questions. There you go, back again. So, well, thanks for joining with me. Yeah, thanks, Anthony, for your feedback on that. You're going to hopefully set up your thermostat in a different way now. If there's anything, the whole purpose of this, and I think it's been really good for us to try and learn about how to essentially answer your questions better. So anything that you want to know about how to control your system, just chuck it on the forum, essentially. Please do. We'll be running these, I think, for the foreseeable future. I think it's good for us. It's helping us to connect to our customer base, understand what you like and what you find easy to understand about our system and things that you find harder. So thanks for joining me today. Really appreciate your company on this. And yeah, any other questions, put them on the forum. I'm going to put some notes now down on this when we upload this link this afternoon to this video, so you can see where to cut to. So yeah, thanks very much.